Good morning to you all. It's such a pleasure to be back with your congregation. I think it was before COVID that I was here before. And it's good to be with you for this hour of intentional gathering and community building. The Time magazine that arrived in January had an article by Angela Haupt titled, "Questions to Ask Yourself at the Start of a New Year." She writes, "When we stop and stand and look back at where we've been and how we felt when we were there, it can serve as a blueprint for where we want to head going forward." Haupt suggests taking a gentle inventory of who and what strengthens or drains us. Then spend more time with the first and set boundaries around those that zap your vitality. She included 5 other questions her colleagues advised exploring as we venture into this year of 2025. Those questions are on your order of service insert, that little insert, which you can take home to consider on your own. Today, I would like to take some time with you to look back at where we've been in 2025. Think about how we felt in those months and talk about where we want to head going forward. So, if we look back through the 12 months of 2024, we remember that in many ways it was a most tumultuous year. There was a contentious election cycle which seemed to split the people of this country down the middle. Ongoing wars in Europe and Africa defied reasonable attempts at viable solutions. Major weather disasters occurred around the globe. Gun violence continued unchecked in many communities. As people with a vital understanding of our interconnection with all people around the nation and around the globe, we grieved with all those touched by these traumas. We worked with other congregations and with other organizations to assist in bringing reason and compassion to the controversies that erupted around them. And we rallied with moral support and physical assistance to the unfortunate victims of these events. Fortunately, there were also many events during 2024 that brought great joy and good times spent together. And for that, we can be extremely thankful. Many people enjoyed gathering together to observe the total solar eclipse in April, as well as the opportunity for many Northern Lights sightings this past year. We celebrated the life of Jimmy Carter, our 39th president, who lived to be 100 years old. Many new jobs were created in the alternative energy sector. Paris's Notre Dame Cathedral reopened to unmatched crowds to appreciate this 800-year-old architectural marvel. A biotech startup company unlocked a way to make inexpensive insulin, which should be available soon to the millions of people who are coping with diabetes. The American economy sustained a long-term bull market. Stopping to think how we felt about the past year's events, we realize it is with a mix of celebration and despair. Depending on whether we had other significant people to discuss and experience them with, as well as our own ongoing personal life events, puts the final spin on our evaluation of where we've been over the last year. With all this we've been through, How can we develop that blueprint for where we want to head going forward into 2025? Who do we want to have with us on that journey? Writer Adam Chandler also had an article in this edition of Time magazine about suggested New Year plans. He quotes sociologist Ray Oldenburg, who said, "Many of us need antibiotics for the national many of us need antidotes for the national epidemics of stress and isolation and American empathy deficits." He suggests the benefit of having regular, voluntary, informal, and happily anticipated gatherings of individuals beyond the realms of home and work. Oldenburg is calling these third places. They help us maintain a healthy work-life balance, providing spaces where we can relax, enjoy ourselves, and engage with different types of people with different views. Studies show how both taking time off and replacing digital communication with in-person interactions improve physical and mental well-being. Third places can give us a sense of connection, which is important for our well-being and our happiness. Whether it's through a noble commitment to volunteering, talking to new people, or steady building of regular social outings. Creating a framework that is safe from the reach of obligation or the temptation of performative busyness is a higher calling for this polarized moment. With the new year, a life with regular time for connection and glorious, unproductive leisure is a worthy goal. Each of us can ask ourselves if we have a third place, or if we have multiple third places. Especially people who are retired need these third places since they may no longer have their second place. That is, their work environment and relationships. Examples of third places include cafes, community service clubs, public libraries, gyms, bookstores, stoops, and parks. It can even be churches, as long as we endeavor to maintain loving acceptance of each other and our different approaches to the questions of spiritual contentment. That is what our 7 UU principles have always helped me to remember. These include justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Relationships. It seems to me that healthy relationships with real people in real time seems to keep jumping out. How often do we remember fondly the many hours spent staring at our phones? Rather, it's the time spent with self, with nature, and most importantly, with other people that builds and sustains mentally healthy human beings, that creates happy memories. These relationships help us to know ourselves better and to learn to understand and work with others better. But I'm not suggesting that building and maintaining relationships is easy. With all the division and disagreement in our society right now, we really have our work cut out for us this coming year. We have to be intentional about staying connected. Reverend Micky Scott Bey Jones writes that Relationship is the sandpaper that wears away our resistance to change. Relationship is the abrasion that agitates enough to make a way forward. Relationship, that consistent and ongoing encounter with people and perspectives different than our own. It smooths the way for the sacred, even as it rubs us raw. As humans, we can't do the sacred all on our own. We need others to have a satisfying life, and we need this on a regular basis. As a result of these regular encounters with others, we do gain understanding and are capable of feeling compassion and unity with the many different people in our sphere of influence. 3 weeks ago, the Episcopal priest who spoke at the presidential inauguration prayer service at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., had this to say about unity. Unity is a way of being with one another that encompasses and respects differences, that teaches us to hold multiple perspectives and life experiences as valid and worthy of respect, that enables us in our communities and in the halls of power to genuinely care for one another, even when we disagree. She stated that all those present were gathered to pray for unity as a people and as a nation, not for agreement, political or otherwise, but for the kind of unity that fosters community across diversity and division. When we think back to the past year and look out at the coming year, I think we can all see that we must be involved in working for unity. At the end of her sermon, Reverend Buddy asked the president directly to have mercy on the many people who are struggling and suffering in our country. But he did little more than highlight in the gentlest style possible the fears faced by LGBTQ+ Americans, undocumented immigrants and their families, as President Trump returns to power and asks that he be merciful in his governance. Tens of thousands of people sent messages of support to the bishop in the weeks since. I was one of those people. I believe we need to speak up, and we need to stand beside the people in our community who are frightened and proclaim the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. They need us to hold up the vision of a world in which there is room at the table for everyone. Our UU Association has an organization called Side with Love that encourages us to work for the rights of the voiceless. Side with Love confronts issues of exclusion, oppression, and violence based on a person's position or identity. With the goal of creating beloved community, the campaign pursues social change through advocacy, public witness, and speaking out in solidarity with those whose lives are publicly demeaned. Our faith has everything to do with how we treat one another. Respectful dissent is a vital part of our national discourse. By preaching truth to power last week, Buddy struck a nerve well beyond the faithful, connecting with a public hungry for merciful action. Unity is the threshold requirement for people to live together in a free society. It is the solid rock upon which to build a nation. It is not conformity. It is not a victory of one over another. It is not weary politeness nor passivity born of exhaustion. Unity is not partisan. Those across our country who dedicate their lives or who volunteer to help others in times of national disaster, often at great risk to themselves, never ask those they are helping for whom they voted in the past election or what positions they hold on a particular issue. We are at our best when we follow their example. Reverend Buddy said, "I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here in our communities." The bishop ended with the statement, "Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger, for we were all once strangers in this land." So, mercy. It's not a word we use very much in our daily lives. What is this religious leader asking the president for? By one definition, mercy is the kind and forgiving treatment of someone. However, mercy is so much more than just a forgiving act. Some common synonyms of mercy are compassion, charity, clemency, grace, and leniency. While all these words suggest a disposition to show kindness or compassion, mercy also implies compassion that forbears punishing even when justice demands it. Another definition of mercy is the compassionate treatment of those in need, especially when it's within one's power to punish or harm them. I'm assuming all of us have heard of the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10. When Jesus was asked, "Who is my neighbor?" he responded with a story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A Pharisee happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." 2 separate Jewish religious leaders had passed by, their robes untouched by the mess of it all. The rescuer was a Samaritan. The person lying beside the road was a Jew. Jews and Samaritans were enemies. Samaritans were not allowed in the temple. Jews were not allowed to eat with them because Samaritans were considered unclean. Yet it is a Samaritan who helped one who thought of him and his kind as the lowest form of human, all while those of the Jewish religious hierarchy refused to help one of their own. The Samaritan, a stranger, a foreigner, an enemy, he stops and cares for the unfortunate man. The Samaritan is the one who shows mercy. Divinity School graduate Matt Perman says there are 4 types of mercy, all seen in the parable of the Good Samaritan: advocacy, assistance, financial, and spiritual. Here's the interesting thing. When we think of showing mercy and serving others, we don't often think of advocacy, but it is often a crucial and simple form of mercy. Just advocating for the person, taking up their cause, defending them, supporting them, advocating for them. Advocacy is different than encouragement. Encouragement is something you do to the person, building them up and strengthening them with your words. Advocacy is something you do for them in relation to others. When the real need is advocacy, encouragement alone can often fall short. On the other hand, real and sincere advocacy is a very encouraging thing. I know that we can't deny the complexities of solving the problems of international wars, climate change, substance abuse, immigration, or our justice system. We all know that change is needed. But the problem with a national policy that feeds the myth that some people are more deserving of our care than others only makes sense in a world governed by scarcity and fear, where protection comes at the expense of others. But our religion's time-honored traditions, our 6 sources, never speak of love and mercy as something to be rationed. We equate love to abundance, a table where there is enough for everyone. Of course, we do not neglect our own families. Of course, we invest in our local communities. In fact, this is how we enact the deepest change, by voting, by confronting, by pushing back against systems in place that refuse to protect the most vulnerable among us. Reverend Kat Armas is a Cuban-American citizen who writes, "The love Jesus speaks of is not about calculation or a choice between our families or neighbors. It is not a finite resource to ration out, but a river that flows, wild and without restraint. The empire's vision of life, the empire's vision of love is built on scarcity, but the kingdom of God is built on abundance." We don't often use this Christocentric vision or these words in our UU congregations, but we can affirm the wisdom in them. Another definition of mercy from 2 centuries ago, the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, is that benevolence, mildness, or tenderness of heart which disposes a person to overlook injuries or to treat an offender better than he deserves. A kind or forgiving attitude towards someone that you have the power to harm or the right to punish. Mercy means being patient with people's quirks. Mercy means helping anyone around you who is hurting. Mercy means giving people a second chance. Mercy means doing good to those who hurt you. Mercy means being kind to those who offend you. We've got a graphic here. While looking for information about mercy, I happened onto this 17th century painting titled "The 7 Corporal Works of Mercy" by David Tenners in 1643. It's a depiction of the verse in the Bible's book of Matthew, verse 25, where Jesus calls on the people to feed the hungry, offer drink to the thirsty, visit the imprisoned and ransom the captive, bury the dead, clothe the naked, care for the sick, and give shelter to travelers. And if you look carefully at that, you can find examples of all those. And you can find this online if you want to take a look at it later, too. I want to close today with a teaching from rabbinic Jewish tradition found in the Torah. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Love mercy now. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Walk humbly now. You are not obliged to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. We can all do some of the work, and I'm sure the members of this UU church are active in this work individually and in community. In addition, we can continue looking for ways to show appreciation and to encourage any other people we see or hear about who are making brave stands for compassionate understanding and mercy in these difficult times. Mercy for the beaten down and abandoned. Mercy for our leaders. Mercy for ourselves. Mercy for all people. Thank you.